Okay. 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 Hi, my name is Kapil, and I will be presenting a lecture on puppetry, and the title of the lecture is Body and Language Performing in Puppet. So I'm starting. Puppet has a very unique existence in the world. The existence interplays between being a living and a non-living entity. Puppets do not live or exist until it is animated. In a puppet, the existence cannot be recognized without the body. This can be assumed because it is in collaboration between the two bodies, one of a puppet and other of a puppeteer. Both bodies work with a series of manipulation that translate between each other so that they can create a language. This language is often created by the audience. The bodies of the puppets are constantly interplaying with the presence of the bodies of the other humans. Puppets exist because somebody creates them. They interact with the object. The They are figure or bodies mostly consisting of the humanly looking limbs. When anyone make puppets, they try to make parts of the puppet in different pieces, and every piece represents a different part of the body. That part is a projection which resembles a human limb and used for locomotion in puppet. Limbs of puppet itself have to look like humans because they are created for humans by humans for telling or showing their histories. Keeping all these concerns of the puppet and its practice, which is in constant negotiation with the puppet between the puppeteer, puppet, and the audience. These ideas do not have a fixed function within these practices. There are multiple bodies involved, gender performs very differently, and the language is always evolving in puppet. It is these function of puppetry that makes it very interesting. This research will try to elucidate a few ideas that can help in unraveling the different problems that exist and also open a different understanding to look at the practice of puppetry. So now I am talking about I will start talking about the body. Body. The body is an external structure of a thing. This is also true in case of puppets. To read or try to understand a puppet body, we might attempt to read it as the human body. Because the puppet body and the human body is always connected. For both the Beauvoir and Merleau-Ponty, the body is understood to be an active process of embodying certain cultural and historical possibilities. It is a citation from Butler. The text is the text is about gender, and it's a 1988. It's from 1988 books. Gender and sex is also the practice of culture and historical ideas which are embodied and performed. So now I will be talking about puppet and puppeteer's body. The puppet is an entity with its distinct existence in the world. It lies between a living and a non-living entity. Yet the puppet does not live or exist until it is animated. Animation cannot exist without the bodies in puppetry. The puppetry is a mix of two bodies, one of the puppet and other of the puppeteer. Both can exist only with each other in puppetry. Both of their bodies work by manipulation of each other so they can create a language which can say something about them and about puppetry. When we talk about the body of a puppet and puppeteer, both help each other in making a body. This has the social norms. Norms mainly work with the differentiation. When we look at human bodies, we differentiate them with each other through the lenses of gender, sex, and materials. And this is what we do with the puppet bodies too. Each and every kind of body is made from some kind of material, like puppets are made from a different type of materials, and puppeteers are made from other material. The bodies of puppets are constantly interplaying with the presence of the bodies of puppet artists, puppeteer, and puppet makers. Puppet exist because somebody creates them, are trying to give them life. Life means that they are made to look like as if they have a life. There are bodies mostly consisting of human looking limbs. When anyone makes puppet, they make their part of puppet in different pieces, and every piece represents a different part of the body. That part is a projection of an organ of the puppet, which resembles a human or animal limb and used for locomotion in puppet. Limbs of puppet or puppet itself have to look or behave like humans because they are created for humans by humans. for telling or showing other stories so the humans underestimate them, so the human understand them, sorry. So the human understand them. According to my experience as a puppeteer, when anyone makes their first puppet, most of the time they unknowingly make a puppet which represents them. This is because of their understanding of their own body, and a puppet is an object which will be manipulated. So they can make it as they manipulate themselves. Maker is just thinking of making a puppet only, and puppet represents the puppet maker. Unknowingly, the puppet also represents the gender of the maker, but it applies only when they are making the puppet for the first time. Most of the idea of making the body of a puppet comes from my understanding of my body. So, when we discuss sex in puppet, sex is related to the sexual organs, but puppeteers mostly do not make sexual organs of puppets. But then, puppet is mainly of a that organ itself. Other organ or full body is not essential in them. For example, in the sex education program, the puppet of the genitals are made to teach the students about the sex. When a puppeteer decides the gender of the puppet, they unconsciously create or imagine a limb of a puppet in their mind about which they are sometimes aware, sometimes not. The sexual organs are invisible in puppets most of the times. Sometimes puppet is sexless when spectators are not able to decide or imagine the invisible limb or sex of the puppet. And sometimes it is sexed by the gesture, posture, and the manipulation of the puppeteer and imagination of the spectator. If it is sex by making the sexual organ or the genitals of the puppet, maybe it will be threatening, like the sex toys or dolls, which sometimes are exact in imitation of the humans, male or female. When we talk about gender, the understanding of the gender is culturally bound and therefore also culturally comprehended. Puppeteers and spectators' cultural and traditional understanding is different from each other. That is why the gender is in between spectator and the puppeteer. When we see a puppet show of a different language and form and a different cultural and traditional background, in my own experience, sometimes after the whole puppet show, we do not know that what was the gender of the characters. We grasp that only by our experiences of these categories. When we look at a human body, we categorize it as as a man or a woman. To say this is also to mean that gender is a component of human body which continually plays a part in society. In most forms of puppetry practices, the puppets made with specification of gender, and in some they are left neutral. The puppet is left genderless so that they can be used to play any gender role. One of my fellow puppeteer who is from Rajasthani traditional puppetry background told me once that in their style of puppetry, sometimes the puppet makers makes the chest with the breast, which most commonly represents women, and some puppet makers do not enhance any body part and leaves for all the puppets looks the same, whether they are female, male, or another gender. Sometimes clothes also represents gender. Of course, sometimes they create confusions too. Sometimes because of the manipulation sounds and voice and speech pattern, sometimes create gender which is strange and misunderstood. However, gender is always in between the spectator and the manipulator. Gender helps the audience to understand a certain narrative of the story which is being performed. Since puppetry is a form of representation, often we as audience under, misunderstood the characters of the when we are not sure about any character's gender. Sometimes puppets or puppeteers fail to perform its gender, which made it misunderstood. Manipulation of gender. Gender of the puppet is important for puppet for being manipulated and for the puppeteer to manipulate the puppet. So he can express completely through the puppet, and it is also important for the spectator, so he will be able to understand the language and the emotion which manipulator is trying to express. In puppetry, puppeteer does physical social action which is a reproduction of the gesture learned by the puppeteers in their lives by social and historical experiences. It is not new gesture. Hello, can you hear me?
Hear you. Yes, we hear you.
Sorry. In puppetry, puppeteer does physical social action, which is the reproduction of the gesture learned by the puppeteers in their lives by social and historical experiences. It is not a new gesture which is done by the puppets. Same applies to the gesture which represents gender through the puppet. The language also represents the gender of a puppet and the puppeteers. If she, he is giving voice to the puppet, the spectator or listener by words and sentences spoke by the voice artist for the puppet and the voice quality used by an artist. Also represents the gender of a puppet by manipulation of the voice and sound. So by Butler, when Butler says the body is an historical idea which represents a particular time of human, also the history and develops from the history and its imitation. The body as a historical idea, mainly talking about gender and its constitution in the body. The body is divided into many categories according to the language. One of them is gender and other which come from the with this category is sex. When we often use these categories of gender and sex interchangeably. In puppets, the gender and sex come from the word puppet itself. Sometimes meanings and the definition of the word puppets indicates to the words girl, boy, little girl, pretty child. If the meaning and definition of the puppet are indicating to these categories or one of the categories, then that one category raises the question about the other categories. If the word puppet, for example, indicates a child, then we have to think about that the child is a boy or a girl for a better understanding of the meaning of the word. That meaning represents the category of gender. However, puppeteer and spectator comes from a cultural and traditional background, and they look almost everything through the category of sex and gender because of we can say language or that is their understanding of everything. Whenever we look at a puppet, we're starting to see the category of sex and gender. If we cannot see, we search for the clue until we find that clue. Our knowledge and understanding are automatically activating our senses. We start to listen to the tone and the voice quality which is not coming from the puppet. However, according to that, we try to understand the category. Can also be recognized by looking at the costume, behavior, gesture, posture, and of the puppet as well. Now I'm going to talk about the language. So, according to Hall, representation is an essential part of the process by which meaning is produced and exchanged between members of a culture. It does involve the use of language, of signs and images which stand for or represent things. In puppetry, we exchange or represent culture between puppeteer and spectator. Language is a means of communication by the use of sounds or symbols. Language is used to express or representing in puppets, whether by sound, symbol, music, or image. All of these categories help to express from puppet and become the language of a puppet. Whatever we see, listen, and understand through puppet is all because of the language of body, word, and sound, and the understanding of that language. Language works with the concept. Hall says that we might form concept for things that we can perceive. So in puppetry, language plays an essential part in expression of the puppet. When we look at the puppet, they have fixed expressions. We cannot change their expressions, and when we make them with fixed expressions, which gives them a fixed language. For instance, if the face of a puppet is a clown face, the language itself become funny, or if the expression is sad or neutral, the language too is sad and neutral. A clown, whatever he, she said, is always understood as something funny or satirical. No matter if a clown is a sad or happy, audience always enjoy, which is because of the fixed language of a clown. According to the understanding of the character and its historical and cultural background, it applies to all other puppets because of their fixed expressions and every expression has its. Okay. So I just complete this. It applies to all other puppets because of their fixed expression, and every expression has its historical, regional, religious, and cultural background and understanding. After that, the symbolic language works until the puppet does not speak. The gesture, posture, and other symbolic gesture work as a language, like waving a hand is present the high and by both, and that the sound or words make it clear that it is a by or high. Also, the puppeteer's language plays an integral part with the traditional language of the form. So, I think my 1 minute is over. So that's it. Thank you. And
Thank you.
sorry that my screen
No
is
worries.
not
Thank you,
working.
Kapil.